Hi everyone, my name is afuabayayi and welcome to the Team Bayayi YouTube channel, where we are parenting, homeschooling, working and churching with a tablespoon of humour. We use our platforms to share with you everything to do with growth, learning and development for family. We are on Instagram, and if you're not already following, make sure that you do follow us at Team Bayayi. Now, the third mum that I had a really good Instagram live chat with is called Mahrukh. Mahrukh is a mum of two boys. Mahrukh homeschooled her first son throughout his entire primary school education after having worked as a teaching assistant in a secondary school and qualified as a teacher herself. She actually fell into homeschooling, but feels that it has really impacted the dynamics of her home in a very positive way. We discussed at length the differences between boys and girls, and that was very interesting. And I really enjoyed this talk because she kept it real and she kept it fun. So I know that you're going to enjoy it. Please do share it with someone that you know will benefit from it, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Enjoy!
So tell us a bit about yourself and about your family. First of all, where are you from? How many children you have? Where do you live? All that jazz.
Right. So originally I'm from Pakistan. I was born here. We moved back to Pakistan when I was 8, lived there for 10 years, came back out here for university. It's at the end of university when I gave my life to Christ, and then met my husband at the church I began to go to, Potter's House, South London. And we got married 2008. We now have 2 children. The oldest is 10, the younger one is 4. We're out in Dartford now, so just outside London, not really outside London. Soon I'm sure we'll become London.
A bit like how crazy it was once upon a time outside London, yeah.
I know, yeah, crazy, huh? And in terms of, so before I was home with the kids, I was a TA for about 7-8 years, working with kids who spoke English as an additional language. Then I did a lot of cover work as a higher level teaching assistant, so around the school. And then I qualified to teach art. And so that was where I was at right before I ended up being home with the children.
Okay. And so you've got, and they're both boys that you have.
Boys, yeah. Strong boys, not just any kind of boys.
Right. Strong. We're going to talk about that actually. And there's quite an age gap between them. So you said there's one that's 10 and there's one that's 4.
Yeah, 6.5 years. What happened? It was life, really, you know. We had the first one, it was like, yay, we're having a family, but then you have to work and you have to put food, you have to pay the bills and all that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Life happened. And it was constantly, I mean, since he was 3, he was like, when can I have a brother or sister? We're like, yeah, when we get there. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't until I was able to be home where we were like, right now we can go for another one. So,
and what's the dynamic like between having the two, like quite an age gap between them?
Yeah, I think when I first had Jessie, my younger one, it was a godsend to have such that bigger age gap, because I had the help, do you know what I mean, with my husband's work and stuff. I think he was off for like 3 days, and then that was it. I was in the deep end kind of a thing, do you know what I mean? So having Asa around, I don't know how I would have done it without him, do you know what I mean? He helped me so much. They get on really, really well. I would say the dynamic, the older, I think if we had one between, it would be ideal. Do you know what I mean? Because the kids, they have would be able to get along with each other even better. They're great. And I think it's worked out good in the long run. The reason is the older one, it's good for him to have to try and see, okay, what does the younger one need? Do you know what I mean? He needed to develop that, right? And so I can eventually see their relationship being one of where, you know, the younger one really looks up to the older one for some kind of wisdom and that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was an odd dynamic, I'll be honest. And I have looked around a lot going, oh boy, do you know, I wish we'd done what other people have done. But then you stop and you realize that God really is sovereign. Do you know what I mean? And it all works out for good. So yeah, it has its difficult moments. But we've just worked around it. They're fine. They're good. You know, I can't complain about it.
No, that's amazing. And so you're staying at home, and you were once in a school environment. So how did you get to the point of saying, I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to homeschool? Like, what actually led you to that decision?
Yeah, I guess the homeschool part, I think anybody who's worked at a school has had those thoughts. What would I do with my own children? Right. So I think I had two distinctive moments that I can think of. One where there was stuff to do with the curriculum. And I was like, if I was teaching my own kids, I wouldn't have to do it this way, you know? Right. And then the other thought was really towards the end of my time there, where I had this really smart kid in my class, really smart, so talented, really good at art. He was going to get an A, you know, but because he was so smart and talented, he had all the other teachers on his case for his coursework and for, you know, for everything else, basically. So he was so stretched. He had this big gap. I think it was about 2 months where he just wasn't able to produce work. And you have to produce work for your portfolio. Well, not for your portfolio, for the coursework part of your art grade. And that block really stifled him and stopped him from achieving what he needed to. And that's the first time I really thought, we don't need to do 10 GCSEs. You only need 5 to pass and to go on to A-levels and wherever. Do you know what I mean? But you can't do that in school. Obviously, you go to school, you got to do the 10. So those thoughts about homeschooling previously had it on my mind. Then, of course, I had, when I had Asa, you know Yinka, right? She had that when we had, because she had a baby at the same time. So she already had 2, and then she had her third daughter. And I had Asa literally, I think they're actually 7-8 days apart, you know? Okay. So I remember so clearly those moments, you know, when you're in the back of church, you're breastfeeding and all that. And she told us, she goes, you know what? I'm homeschooling. My kids, I've done it. I've sent the letter. You know what I mean? And we watched her journey, and she's like, I just want more time with my kids. I don't want the tired part of them. I just want, do you know what I mean? And just watching that, seeing her do her trips and all that kind of stuff, it was really inspiring. Really inspiring. And I mean, and whenever she talked about it, she was genuinely enjoying it. Do you know what I mean? As far as the getting to that point, though, I would look at that and be like, oh boy, but how are we going to do it? Finance, do you know what I mean? We have to live on one salary. Right now, we're both working to pay the bills and all that kind of stuff. So, and then with work, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I am spending so much time with all these other kids, helping them get their GCSE, being the point person for them. Do you know what I mean? In their lives. And I was literally seeing Asa was nursery age, coming up into reception now. And I was probably seeing him about an hour and a half a day. Do you know what I mean? In the morning, it was about 20 minutes, bath, clean, you know, here's your breakfast. My friend would come take care of him. She would drop him to school, get home, and it's the same thing. I'm in the kitchen cooking, I'm doing your reading, you know, bath and to bed. Ben was working nights. So we were like just getting through, doing life and doing family. Do you know what I mean? As a matter of course. But there was just no, I think I just got tired. Do you know what I mean? So for 2 years, I began to pray. I was like, God, I just want to be home. I don't know how, I can't see it happen. And this is not like a demand and I have like a time limit on it, but this is just my heart's cry. I want to be able to be home with my children. I want to have some time. He was 5 and no sign of a sibling. Do you know what I mean? How much longer were we going to wait? How much longer are we going to wait for me to get to a place where, now you have a decent enough salary to go on maternity leave, to then come back and be able to pay the childcare? How much how much longer was it? That's the real struggle, right? That none of us, it's a fairy tale. Nobody tells you.
Yeah. Like you've articulated it so well, the challenge of doing all of that. And so those were the seeds that were being sown, and then you kind of came up with.
And then so the end part of that is I had qualified to teach, but I was just doing agency work. Nothing was coming through proper work-wise. I was either showing up at interviews with a good, decent CV, man. I qualified well with my teaching thing, you know. Even people at work were like, I don't know why you're not getting the interview, or I don't know why you didn't pass that. You know, some of the interviews that I did good, they're like, it doesn't make sense. And I would have to quietly retreat and go, maybe it's that prayer I'm praying. Because I'm doing it because I know I need to, but you know, and I was doing a good job, you know, I wasn't like messing things up on purpose. But yeah, so we got to a point one summer where it was like, right, rent needs to get paid this summer. And it's agency work. You don't get paid through the summer. Do you know what I mean? So it's like either we need to move or we need to pay. We need, you know, I don't know, something has to happen.
Yes.
So that was it. We just literally started looking at, Ben had just recently retrained to do what he does now. And we were like, right, if we're going to make this work on one salary, we need to move to a place where we can afford it. And we literally looked up places. Sorry, I'm looking at his comment. We started looking up places where we could move to and we could make this work financially. And the idea at that point, I wasn't thinking about homeschooling. The idea was just, if I can't get work, then I need to be home because there's no point paying anybody. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So that was the move at that point.
And when did you when you presented that as an idea to your husband, who is on this live, and he just told off, thank you for doing that. Some nonsense guy who tried to like promote some nastiness on the chat, but you know, he doubled it. And we locked him out the live, or her, so we're good, we're good. When you spoke to him, what did he say? Like, how did he respond to the idea?
Yeah, I think it's something that we had been bandying about for a while, because I think you get to June and it's like, right, you know, nothing's happening. That's when a lot of the interviews come out and all of that, right? All job opportunities. And I was like, but what if? And so we had started to contemplate the what if. And yeah, so originally in terms of the move to make it work on one salary, no problem. It made total sense, right? When it came to the homeschooling, so that was, we moved in August now. How are you supposed to get a decent school in August, right? I didn't know this at the time. Kent is short on primary schools, places.
Right, okay.
So let's throw that in the mix, right? So we managed to get a couple of really, I mean, you read their Ofsteds, rubbish schools, do you know what I mean? And we were just sitting there going, okay. So now we have two options. Put him in a rubbish school and work our way up from there, or I'm home now for a bit with no prospect of a job, and if I do get one, we still have to figure out paying somebody to take care of him, because I didn't have family or anybody around to jump in like a lot of people sort out in those kinds of circumstances. And so then we said, well, we could try it. He was 5, so if anything went funny, do you know what I mean? Or wasn't worth
just put it back into school. Yeah.
I mean, how bad could it be? That's the way I looked at it, right? And we jumped.
Right.
That was, yeah.
Now, you actually said when we had a conversation that you had always intended to homeschool him for his primary education, the formative years. So what was your thinking behind that? Yeah,
so that I would say so I guess on my side, it evolved to that, you know, that, yeah, okay, secondary school, he can go. With Ben, he was adamant that he needs to have an experience of both. Because school is such a, you know, to him, it's like, it's such, and he's right, I would agree.
Ben is your husband. For everyone who's listening, Ben is her husband.
Yeah. Let him have an experience of both. And so I was like, okay, in my head, I was like, yeah, okay, we can push it to like year 8, year 9, because we all know what happens with the hormones when we get to 12, 13, better to do that all at home and then throw him into school, right? Then I really began to think about it from the child's perspective, though. Imagine you've spent your whole life pretty much doing things one way, and then right at the time when it's GCSE time, you're expected to integrate into a school and adapt to the kind of work that they do, the way they do it, and then also pass your GCSEs. I was like, I'm asking a bit too much for him. And so then that's when I began to think, okay, if we're going to do this, then we've got to do it year 7 time, because then a lot more people are starting on the same page. Do you know what I mean? It's not, it evolved also in the sense of, okay, what are the options? How can I do GCSEs at home? How much is it going to cost? Can we afford it? How much we're really going to have to save up towards it, because the costs of GCSEs are, per exam, not even per subject. Do you know what I mean? So like for science, they have 9 exams. It all adds. So it was thinking about all of those things and then weighing up how much of a good job can I do from home, and then so that was the thinking at that time. And in terms of, and the final point on it having evolved, getting to know my son better and knowing the way he is, he really thrives in competition.
Right.
So I think I think it would be good for him to be in that kind of environment at this time to kind of, fight some stuff out.
Yeah. And this is the thing, because you're making these decisions based on what's best for him. Do you know what I mean? And that's really, and I remember we had the conversation where you were saying that really all parents, whether you're homeschooling, whether you're not homeschooling, we're all fighting the fight of what's best for our children. Yeah. And so we've kind of got to put, I guess, our own personal desires and our own personal agendas aside to make that like the forefront of everything that we do. And so that's really interesting. In terms of like your husband's like perspective of him having the experience of both, was he, I don't know which tense to use, is his thinking behind that like the social aspect of it? Is it to do with, or is it more like the learning environment in terms of more competition? Is that what you think he was thinking?
I think it's just the way I look at it is it's almost like not a watermark of, so like a softer version of what you're going to face in the work environment. You know what I mean? So I think the way we're looking at it is throw him in, he's still coming home to us. We can still work through a lot of things. Do you know what I mean? And he's the type of kid, he learns on the go. He has to be thrown into it. He's not going to watch and see people go through situation and go, oh, okay, that's what happened to them. I won't do it. He'll go into exactly the same thing. You know what I mean? And then find out for himself. So for someone like that, it's good to be thrown into it, and then he'd be able to, talk. Our dinner table is proper, like we talk about everything. It's where we learned, about where we've discussed, what is homosexuality? What is this? Big topics. Do you know what I mean? We talked with it. So that's the aim. I'm not the parent of a teenager. I don't know if that's how it goes. Do you know what I mean? But that's the aim, that we keep. Like, we were thinking, the way we're looking at him being in secondary school, it's almost like, a test run for the real world, right? Send him in. We've done, so much work over the years, right? I mean, like he's 15, but you know what I mean? We want to see how it plays out, because he's a hands-on kind of a learner, right? Go in there, see how it goes. How do you cope in that kind of environment? Toughen up your mind, grow a thicker skin in that kind of environment. He's not going to necessarily get that with me, my child, in this environment. Do you know what I mean? Specific to us. This is not a blanket. Definitely not. I wouldn't recommend. We're specialists in our own children. I think that's about it.
And so, how you were talking about before you actually went into homeschooling, you wanted to spend more time with your children, and you were looking at things and how things were done in a school environment, and you were thinking, how would I deal with my child? So with him going into school, is that going to still influence the way in which you in the way in which you parent, in terms of, are you still going to, make efforts and endeavor to have more time and to not necessarily, like, how are you thinking it's going to work out the balance of it all? Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I guess that side of it, I'm going to see how it plays out. When I said I needed more time with him, I didn't, I had 5 months off maternity with Asa, and then I was back at work. So I've had literally no time. I wasn't the one to potty train him. I wasn't the one to teach him how to ride a bike. I didn't know he could ride a bike, until about 8 months later when we met a friend of his in the park and he ran off with him and rode his bike. I was like, hang on a second, what's going on? Two-wheeler as well. Do you know what I mean? I was like, what? So there's so many things that I didn't have the opportunity to do with him. And when I first started homeschooling, it literally was like I was getting to know my kid again. I didn't know, this is what you like, da, da, da. So for a little while, we joined Classical Conversations, the program that Yinka does. Yes. And it blew my mind. The program is brilliant. Yeah, but what blew my mind was my 5-year-old was memorizing all this stuff, this timeline, history timeline from creation to now, all these science facts. He's memorizing his times tables. I was like, can children this age do that? And all the kids there were doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I didn't even know that. Do you know what I mean? Especially when you're trained in secondary, you're like, those primary school children who don't start talking properly until they're 12. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And they even come to us and they can't read, So my first 2 years was just getting to know Asa, what he's capable of, what he likes, how I can learn how he learns. Do you know what I mean? And I was still basking in the fact that I think it took me 2 years to get over the stress. Do you know what I mean? When I was leaving, the stress that I had been going through in all that time, I was just like, oh gosh, thank you, God. Such a privilege to be able to be home with my own child and get to know him. I realized how much I didn't have a clue once I was home.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. And so tell us about Classical Conversations. Tell us about that program because is that the approach that you use for homeschooling?
So Classical Conversations, being a part of that was such a blessing for me because it totally opened my eyes to classical education, which I didn't know anything about really.
And please enlighten us because a lot of people won't even know what that is.
Right. Okay. So classical education is basically taking education back to the classics, and it's basically mainly educating through history. Right. So that becomes your main thing that ties everything together, your history. Right. It's also based on a good essay to read is somebody called Dorothy Sayers. It's called The Lost Tools of Learning. And she talks about the 3 stages of learning, which is what Classical Conversations, the program, is based on. It talks about how children in the younger ages, from 4 to 8, they need to learn, they're the grammar stage. So you're learning and memorizing all these facts and it's almost like, when you're in school and you're teaching, you have to teach the kids some of the keywords for your subject or your topic that you're doing for the day. So grammar learning is learning those kinds of main bones for the main different subjects. Do you know what I mean? So it's history, science, geography, maths, Latin, because that's one of the subjects that they would include in the classical curriculum, and art. But in art, you're kind of learning about different artists and stuff, and science. I don't know if I said science. Anyway, so that's what, and so in that essay, she grammar, then the next stage is logic, which is when they begin to argue a little bit and they begin to question things a little bit. And then the final stage is rhetoric, which would probably be like year 9 upwards, where they're learning to put their argument into a kind of coherent manner. They need to be able to state their opinions, right? And be able to, and kind of fit all that in the world and all that. So that it opened my eyes to that. And I loved that because I didn't realize how much you need a bar. I needed a bar. And I think I spent a long time trying to first figure out what I needed to do. Thanks to Inagene. I don't know if Inagene's listening. She gave me this book, another book. She said, Learning Without School by Ross Mountney. And that helped me so much because coming from the institution, right, to be home now, I was literally ready to do school at home. Do you know what I mean? We'll do 8 to 3. We're going to have 10 subjects. I'm going to kill you. Do you know what I mean? We're not having fun. So So that really, it's written by a teacher, and she homeschooled her kids. And so that was really interesting for me. It kind of broke me out of that. So we really kind of slow stepped into it. And then by the time we got to classical conversations, I was really just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much these kids can do. They got to meet once a week. They would do presentations. He's 5. It was show and tell kind of stuff. But they had to, say, my name is Asa, and this is my this, and this is what I like about it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'll take any questions. And then, it's pretty, I was pretty impressed with some of the stuff he was coming out with. I was like, what? And the confidence, because I didn't know him like that. I hadn't seen him in those kinds of environments. Do you see what I mean? So that was that. We weren't able to stay with them, mainly because of distance. I don't drive, so it was just going to work out really, really hard like that. And then finance also, we kind of were like, the next year ended up being like budget homeschool, but we continued with the program at home.
Okay.
And it was brilliant because of the way that it uses the memory.
It's actually, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay. It's actually curriculum, isn't it?
It's a curriculum that she's actually based on. I think your last guest had The Well-Trained Mind.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all based on that original essay that I was talking about. But The Well-Trained Mind, see, if I hadn't gone to classical conversations, I wouldn't have found that book, The Well-Trained Mind. And that became my bar then, because now I'm here at home. And The Well-Trained Mind basically sets out a whole classical curriculum. That's how that lady, it's written by a mom and a daughter. And the mom taught her daughter this. And that daughter has gone on to write all these books. If you start looking at the names of those books, you'd be like, what? How did you just write a book about the study of science and then also write a whole series on the history of the world? She's a phenomenal thinker, phenomenal writer. And the mom trained her like that. She educated her all the way up into before she went to uni at home using this curriculum. It's brilliant.
Right. And so the curriculum can actually take you all the way through to uni, because there are homeschoolers who do that. They homeschool from primary, secondary school, A-level,
all the way to uni.
all the way to uni. And so it really is, as you've articulated so well, it's a personal decision for you, your family, and your children, and what you think is right. For your family and your journey.
I will just add that the way that I use it is I don't do all the subjects. We did try doing an extra language. We did Latin for a little bit when we were with classical conversations. We tried to carry on the grammar part of that at home, like in terms of the memorization. But it didn't go so well. So I was like, okay, let's start learning Urdu, and so I started teaching. We have to do another language. But I was just like, let's just do a language.
From Latin to Urdu,
let's just do a language, right? Anyway, I got to teach him the alphabet, and then we kind of fell off the wagon with that. Do you know what I mean? And then we kind of got to a point where I also realized, gosh, boys have hormones too. Do you know what I mean? And so I have hormones too. Do you know what I mean? I had my second baby, and then that year was like a very different year. And so I kind of got to where we totally had to, whatever serious structure we had totally went down the drain. Do you know what I mean? And we had to kind of rebuild up, but a lot more loosely. And so now the way I use that book is kind of like a bar. I check in every three times a year. Do you know what I mean? And say, well, how am I doing? How's it all going? And I check in with the national curriculum a couple of times a year to say, okay, where should we be? What else can I do to get us kind of closer? Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't say I use it rigidly or anything, but it's nice to have something to go back to and kind of get yourself back focused again, in those times where...
Because there are so many curriculums that you can choose from and you can pick from, and that's one of the beauties of homeschooling. And so how have you found it, the journey of homeschooling? Let's keep it real. Let's keep it 100 for people who kind of think that, this is a lovely, I mean, of course, we think it is, but give us the reality of the experience that it's been for you.
Yeah, I think everybody would deal with it very differently, because I think, the thing that has actually kept me, because I tell you, the hardest thing for me is looking around going, everybody else seems to be sane, I'm dying here, And so one thing that has kept me is, I would say, we've got different homes, right? Setup of our homes will be different. Some people are single moms doing this, okay? Different homes, we have different resources. Some people have tons to spend. Some people don't. Some people can get around, they can drive an hour and go somewhere. It's no big deal. For some of us, it's like, that's going to be 3 hours on the train. When am I ever going to do anything else? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we have different children, right? So for me, the hardest bit was just being around, even though I was looking forward to that time. After a while, it was like, I'm around him all the time. I've got to find a way around that. Do you know what I mean? So one of the deals that we struck is every weekend, Ben takes the kids, both of them, out for a couple of hours. That really helped me. Do you know what I mean? The actual teaching part, we kind of just enjoyed it. Because again, in that essay, there's one thing I have just hung over my head because it really, really helped me. She said at the end of that Lost Tools of Learning, she goes, we have failed our children, or this generation that we're educating, basically, if we can't teach them how to learn, right? Knowledge is infinite. How much knowledge can I pack into my kids, and how much is that necessarily going to help them in the future? It might be totally irrelevant knowledge 10 years from now, to be honest. But I need to teach my kids to learn, how to learn, and then to love learning. If I can keep that fire alive, right? So that became my mission then. It's about keeping that fire alive. So in that first year, it literally was just, we were out as much as we possibly could, whether it's collecting rocks or looking at worms or going to museums. Ace, I can give you a tour of all the free museums now in London. Do you know what I mean? We've done so much. But it's just getting out, and I found just being out, especially because he learned so much by talking. We talked about all kinds of things. One time we were just walking over a bridge. He goes, how is a bridge made? And did you know? And then we started looking up stuff to do with, bridges and whatever. And we just went wherever it took us, to be honest. I did find, I'd say 8, 9, and this is where she said the logic stage kinds of starts, where they begin to argue or they begin to question things a lot more. It's like, almost like the way I saw it happen was like the rose-colored glasses came off. and it was like, this isn't fun anymore. Do you know what I mean? I could like literally do cartwheels and all of that. And it was like, nothing was fun anymore. Do you know what I mean? So I had to find a way around that. He loves information. So it was just pack him in with more information, find more encyclopedias, things that seem more interesting, more grown up. Let's find more resources, stuff. I got him a history series. You read that. Do you know what I mean? You don't want me to do it with you. You don't want me to stand right over you. Fine. You read it and then we'll talk about it. You know what I mean? We had to find different ways of kind of giving him a little bit more independence. I think that's also what he was looking for. And we kind of had to work around that. And then I think the other big, I wouldn't call it a struggle, but it's challenge, right, is the writing side of everything. It's fun to learn by singing songs and talking and all that kind of stuff, but getting them to sit down and write, and then how long are we going to sit at the table? I mean, after about 10 minutes, I'm done too. I'm running off to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. Of course, they're going to want to go to the toilet. You know what I mean? So then how much do I want to fight that? How much of my morning am I gonna spend wrestling with them? Is it worth it? And so we did a year out actually, where it was just, okay, this year we're just doing maths and English. I'm not doing anything else. We're just gonna do maths and English, and we'll find different ways of doing it, and we'll just get up to speed. Oh, I don't feel confident with my spellings. Right, let's just find different ways of doing your spellings. Do you know what I mean? You're only gonna sit at the table to do maths. Everything else, you can run around the whole house. I don't care, but stand on your head, do it however you want. But we're going to get through this. Do you know what I mean? And then once that's done, there's going to be some kind of a reward somewhere down the line. We'll figure it out, And I guess the other thing that I really found helped me is, whereas in the beginning I was such a stickler for, I will start at this time and I will finish at this time and and I think it kind of came and went. Now we've kind of settled at a place where when you wake up, X, Y, and Z, things have to be done. Do you know what I mean? And we must do our school on these days. We have a timetable. These are the things that happen on different days. But, I'll be like, okay, the latest we can start is 10. Do you know what I mean? And you don't want to do it in order. I said, fine, we'll flip it around. Do you know what I mean? And then sometimes by Friday, everyone's brains are fried as well. So we just have basic, what we need to get through. And once we've done that, cool, we've ticked the box, right? Let's find something to watch together, or today can be our cooking day, or this term we've set it as like, we're going to do some art or something like that, because Jessie loves that. So it's a nice way to end the week. But yeah, I think being flexible, which is actually the hardest thing to do when you're trying to run a home, take care of your kids, stay sane, and be nice, is actually the hardest thing.
Be nice, Lord. Keep it real. Sometimes you're not feeling that because you're stressed, you're tired, you put your own things. Yeah. You know what? I'm sure that there are people that are watching, they're thinking, you did what? Because the whole concept of okay, you know what, for this year, we're just going to do it. So we're just going to concentrate on the show. Forget everything else. Or for example, to just be like, okay, let's just, switch it up a bit. There are people that are going to be thinking, what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
What? But that's the reality of homeschooling, is that, it has to work for you just as much as it works for your child. And you can if you come from a school environment or an institution background, you can kind of think, gosh, but there'll be gaps, they'll miss out on things, and it's just not like that. You can pick up where you left off so easily. And do you know what I mean? That flexibility is really important. I'm still learning with that because I'm extremely that's just the way that I'm wired, and I'm still learning to be like, do you know what, today it's okay to kind of hands off, let's just roll with something else.
I do think it's different when you've got multiple kids, and I can't really talk too much about that. Do you know what I mean? This is like my first year where I'm actually sitting down with both my kids at the table, and Jesse can manage about half an hour and we're done. Do you know what I mean? And actually in half an hour he's done everything he's meant to. What is he learning? A few letters and numbers. Do you know what I mean? So I think the dynamic is definitely very different. But I do know also the same way how we don't want to be told what to do 24/7. Kids are people too. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, we have those days where it's just it has happened in the past where it's the middle of the week, but most of the time it'll be on a Saturday, and it's like, okay, I'm watching, they're watching what they know which programs they're going to watch, and they want to be left alone. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, fine, you know what? I want to be left alone too. Get on with what I'm doing, and just make it work. Because then by lunchtime, we've got to be smiles at the table, do you know what I mean? And still care. I'm sorry. I do love my children, but I will always be honest about that kind of stuff because it's actually the real an important part for me to even just be able to say things like that. You kind of just feel a bit better. Do you know what I mean? Love my kids. I do love them.
Yeah, take them, guys. So in terms of your younger son, because you said you've got the older one and the younger one, and you're actually thinking of not homeschooling your second son, or are you?
Right. So that is to me recently. I was saying to you the other day when we did that test, I said this, you don't realize how good this has been for me, because this has made me reflect and look back on the last 5.5 years and be like, wow, God, you opened up my eyes to this whole other world that I wouldn't be a part of if I hadn't been able to be home. I've learned so much about my children, my home, being a mom, even being a wife. Do you know what I mean? And I had, over the last few months, I had really begun to feel like, I don't think I can do this anymore. So by the summertime, I was like, right, I'm ready. Do you know what I mean? I am, it's time for both of them to go to school. I will find some kind of job that I can do from home. And it's time for me to earn some money. I love it. Right, because I'm not the type who can run a business. I can't even do anything from home. I don't know. It's just everybody's personality is different. Our abilities are different, right? It just wasn't working. I've tried a bunch of things on the side, not working. So it's like I need to get rid of them so I can do some of that. But you've made me stop in my tracks, and a few other conversations I've had recently. So I was saying to my oldest son, because he was all like, oh, Jesse, you're going to be going to school soon. I mean, the window's open now for us to actually apply. But it made me stop. And I said to him, look, mommy's built a case for him to go to school. Because literally, I have proved it, I tell you. And the people who I've been talking to, they're like, yeah, solid. Do you know what I mean? Makes total sense. I'm going to build a case now, though, for being home with him and then see which one wins. That's what I'm going to do. I've got till January. I was talking to Ben the other day and he goes, "What's the rush?" And I was like, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. There's no rush. He's so little, right? I mean, if I put him in, great. If I don't, so what? I can put him in a couple of years. Do you know what I mean? But I'm going to take more time with that decision now. Do you know what I mean? Because it has been fantastic being able to be home with them at this time. The kinds of questions that have come out. My mom always used to say, she goes, "It's not quantity time. It's not quality time. It's quantity time." You know that saying? They say quality time. She goes, "It's quantity time." Kids come up with the randomest things at the randomest times. And mine have been famous for that. Something happened on the weekend, it comes out during a maths lesson on Wednesday. Do you know what I mean?
You're like, and you know what you said about the whole kind of earning money thing, I can really relate to that because I left a position of being head of department. Wow. When I went into homeschooling, and at the time, Farai was in full-time ministry, so he was. Wow. For those of you who aren't like, the church lingo, he was a full-time pastor, and if you know anything about the reality of that, you are living off it. You know what I'm saying? It was such a change. That's why over there. With the line, you're not allowed. And so it was quite an adjustment. It was such an adjustment to have to make, because I was money was in the bank, and if I wanted to go buy a bag from Aldo, I want to go to the theatre, and there was that flexibility to do that because money was there. I became head of department by the time I was 24. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
So I was used to having, a considerable amount of money in the bank, and I think it was quite a significant lifestyle change, and a compromise to have to make that decision to homeschool. Now, yes, I do run my own business, so I do have a sort of income coming in. But when you run your own business, you don't have your paycheck at the same time every single month. Do you know, it's not the same. Like, yes, you do have money in, but it's not the same as when you are employed and everyone exactly what you're going to be getting, and you can budget. You know, it's completely different. So I completely relate to what you're saying in terms of, it's a huge sacrifice that you make when you go into that decision. And I've had a number of people actually ask me, like, can you also homeschool my child, type of thing, and they're saying it with the best of they see how wonderful it is, but they're just not in a position to do it, and they sort of would love if their child could join. And I'm like, girl, and in my mind, I don't say it, but in my mind I'm thinking, you have no idea the level of sacrifice that has gone into the decision that I've made and the lifestyle that we've chosen. Do you know what I mean? It's a big deal. It affects so much. But I always have the motto that, do you know what? I'm an intelligent woman. And there is always time to make money. That was my mindset. There was always time to make money, but I'm not going to get this time back. And my rationale behind it, in the sense of I can pick up, in I don't know 5 years time or 10 years or whatever I can, and I can make those boss moves and if I want to, because there is time to do that. My qualifications are not anywhere, my degree's not going anywhere, my intelligence is not going anywhere, but this time, once it's gone, it's gone. And that was my kind of rationale behind it when I made that decision. So I definitely relate to that. And so when it comes, so at the moment you are choosing between homeschooling and not homeschooling with your second son, but you haven't yet kind of made the crucial decision?
Yeah, we haven't made a hard decision. Not yet. We shall see. To be decided.
Do you think there's anyone that can homeschool? Like, knowing the realities of it, and the experience, do you think that anyone can kind of do this, or do you think that it takes it's a lot,
a certain kind of woman?
Do you know what I mean?
I think anyone can do it if you want to. I think that's the key, to be honest, right? Because otherwise we're making the assumption that everything comes prepackaged, right? I need a bit of patience, right? Got it? Because that's the thing people say the most of, you homeschool your own kids, you must have a lot of patience. No, I don't. My children know it. Right? And we're also assuming that if I don't know. Listen, parenting is the unknown, full stop, right? Homeschooling is an extension of that, really, right? You've chosen to do this at home with your kids. There's not one way to homeschool. If there was, then it would take a certain kind of a person, right? I could choose to homeschool my child, but I'm kind of outsourcing for a lot of different subjects, and but I'm in control of what they are being educated about. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. It doesn't have to be I'm the one who's getting the textbooks and you're going to sit at my table. It can happen in, so many different ways. It depends on how creative you are, really. So yeah, I do think that anybody can. I do think that when it's you and your husband, you need to both be on board with it, though. Do you know what I mean? I think that's very, very important. And I think it's extremely important to have a supportive community around you. You need at least a couple of people that you can talk to or cry to, or do you know what I mean? And not this is so rough, but everybody has down moments. And I think it would be silly to think that or say that I don't. Do you know what I mean? You need to be able to have somebody that you can turn to and say, hang on a second. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So those were the two conditions actually with Ben. It's take him out and I'm just going to need to vent sometimes, please. Do you know what I mean? I don't need advice. I need to vent. And it's,
yeah.
Right. And that's just my husband, right? But I've got some precious friends who I've been able to talk to over the years, or I can just turn to, or I can just call and just talk. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you can get through a whole week and you'll be like, hang on a second, how many adults have I spoken to apart from my husband this week? Do you know what I mean? It has literally been and that's another thing I began to realize as parenting, this is why parenting is hard, okay? Because we can be working, doing all these different things. But most of the time, the only situation in which you are literally living your every moment for someone else is parenting. Those kids are dependent on you for everything. Yeah. So no wonder, right? Even though you might have had an incredibly busy schedule before you had your child, once you have them and you are with them 24/7 and responsible for them, and the responsibility of their education does weigh heavy on anyone who decides to homeschool, yeah? It's a whole other ball game, and it's intense. Just for that reason, they're totally dependent on you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, anyway, that's what I think.
It's a lot. And so what is your approach to homeschooling at the moment? Do you follow a particular curriculum? How do you go about it? What's your style of homeschooling?
So we use Saxon Maths for maths. I've used a variety.
About Saxon Maths. I'm going to put this in the chat because Raquel, who I believe is on the chat, is the first person who told me about Saxon Maths. And I've learned so much about it since. It seems to be a really good resource for maths, a good way of...
I'll tell you what I like about it. I like how the lessons are written out. This was the thing that I kind of struggled with at the beginning, that, oh my gosh, so how do I teach him this, that, and the other, right? With this, they literally tell you what to say to your child. You got a script for the teacher, It starts and it's very, very simple. It's called incremental, and it's constantly revising what you've done before. They have a test every every 5 lessons on what they've learned in the 5 lessons before. You learn small concepts. The kids don't even realize that they're putting together all these big concepts. Do you know what I mean? I taught Asa algebra in 2 days, which we just had to learn for something else that he was doing. Yeah. He didn't know that he had been learning it all this time. He just hadn't fit it together that it could look like this in a question, because I kind of had to speed him up just for something that we were doing. But that's how good the curriculum is. It's so incremental. Some people find it boring because it's like such baby steps. So it depends on how you use it. Do you know what I mean? I know a lot of people who might skip the first 20, 30 lessons because it's a lot of revision from the previous year, and they don't feel like they need it. We kind of work, we take a good summer holiday, you know, we don't work through the year. And our summer holidays are normally like mid first, second week August, and we go all the way till maybe the 3rd, 4th week of September when we start like that. It's just how it's happened for us, and we've stuck to it. And so he's had a long break. He needs the revision. Do you know what I mean? I might not work through those lessons with him. He can read it for himself and just get on with it until we get to the stuff that he doesn't know. But yeah, what I like about it is that it's small chunks. It's constantly revising. And it's taught him right from how to write your numbers correctly to now we're at that stage where at some point this year he's going to hit a bit of serious algebra. It's so that's what I love about it. And it's all mapped out for you. The kids get to do things like, you know, taking the temperature every day, drawing a picture of this same tree that you're going to observe through the year. Do you know what I mean? So it's got bits of practical bits to it as well. They learn about the calendar and how to write the dates, and they, you know, and all that kind of stuff as well through it. So it's really good.
So that's maths. And so what about the other?
Yeah, so for the other stuff, I've used a variety of different things for English, some of it online. We're currently using something called IXL, so it's just lots of exercises for him. He likes to do stuff online, so that's like, okay, quick, you can do that. And we've used a lot of Schofield and Sims. Do you know those? They use them in primary schools right now. So like workbooks, and then we'll just look stuff up online and things like that. That's maths and English. History, this is my favorite of everything that we've done. It's Story of the World by Susan Wise Bauer, the same lady who helped write The Well-Trained Mind. It's brilliant.
Oh, right, okay.
Really, really good. And it's written as a read aloud book. It's not a studying book. It's not a textbook. Really, really, really good. And she talks about, you know, ancient Africa. She talks about creation and the flood, and you know what I mean? All of that, literally from the beginning of time. The world is 6,000 years old in this history book, which is what I love.
It supports like what the Bible says essentially about how old the world is and that kind of thing.
It's a creation point of view, on history, which I love. I really, really love that. And it's really helped us, you know, even things like, say, you know, dinosaurs and stuff. We did a lot about dinosaurs in the beginning. Going to those museums and stuff used to really do my head in. That's when we really discovered Ken Ham. He's got that whole series on the Answers series, and they have a kids series, you know, where they ask all these questions like, did Adam and Eve have a belly button? Do you know what I mean? Questions only kids could ask, and he lays it out, man, from the Bible. He's a proper creation scientist. Really, really good resource to teach the kids from. We did a whole series on the case for Christ. They have a kids version of that, so that was a fun thing to do, kind of on the side. So Lee Strobel's written it, same guy who wrote his testimony out. He's written one for kids, and it was really, really good at a time when he was, you know, looking at the history of the Bible, and like in the sense of, he's like, well, all these guys are saying the same thing. Why, you know, my son. Okay, let's address this. We can, you know, we took time to do that. We can do that in school time. That was fun. Those are, and then geography, we've kind of jumped here and there. With the story of the world and with the classical conversations curriculum, you actually do a lot of geography through all of that, you know, and you get to look at the ancient world as well as where we're at now. So that was really, really good. We enjoyed that. Right now, because obviously we're preparing to send him to secondary, I'm just working through some of those CGP books. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
So they've got a really nice, affordable set for geography. And then next year, I mean, like January time, I want to try and get their science. Just more what we're working on right now is like a way to, you might know all this stuff, but you need to be able to articulate it and also write it down, right? And a lot of children are able to do that by secondary. Whether or not he's fully able to do that too, I mean, he does a good job, but I want him to be exposed to it, be aware of it, that kind of thing. So that's where we're coming from. So this year it's kind of more school kind of curriculum, but mainly encyclopedias. You know, we've used a lot of encyclopedias, and we literally would read like a double spread talk. And then we got a book on experiments. So we did lots of experiments like that. And then just get out to as many museums and trips that we possibly could to make it fun. He hated art, so I kind of had to put that aside a bit.
How does he feel about him going into school? Like, he's been homeschooled, because you're the first homeschooling mom that I've spoken to whereby their child is actually going to be taking the step now to go into mainstream school, having been homeschooled for all these years. How does he feel about that?
He's really excited.
Really
excited. Like I should be insulted, excited.
That is so funny. Oh my God.
And I think for him, he was saying the other day, he's like, Mom, he's like, I love you. I'm like, thanks for prefacing it with that. I needed that. But to him, it's like an experience. Do you know what I mean? It's, I'm going to be a part of this, that, and the other, and I'll get to do this and I'll get to do that, you know. I don't know. It's not, I mean, yeah, I don't know how to put it into words. He's excited. I know it's going to be challenging, you know, so this is the thing we're trying to prepare him for now is the fact that, you know, adjusting to something like it's a major change. Going from primary to secondary is a big deal, right? Now to go from homeschooling to secondary, it's a big deal. It's going to be, it's a massive campus, no matter what secondary school you go to, they're all massive, right? You're changing from class to class. You've got a variety of different temperaments in your teachers. You know, bullying exists everywhere. You know, let's be real, right? It becomes a bit of a pecking order as well, right? Loudest person's heard. Right?
Yeah.
We all know how it works in a secondary school. So there's going to be a lot of adjusting, a lot of things that would have happened, maybe gone unspoken, and he's going to have to work through a lot of things. So I think within myself, I'm totally ready that, you know, okay, we might have some very wobbly days. We might get to some point within the next couple of years where like, what, did we do the right thing? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's going to, right? It's definitely, I don't imagine it to be smooth sailing. If it is, that's amazing. But I'm not kidding myself. Do you know what I mean? I know it's not going to be easy, but I do think that, in his situation, in his case, it's going to be good for him in the long run. Those ones.
You made that point about, yes, that's a very lovely point, actually. That's a compliment to you and your husband. He's ready for whatever, you know, and that's really true. And it's interesting that comment that you made about the loudest child gets heard the most. And I remember when I was teaching, I taught GCSE at A level, and absolutely, it's the child that's the most badly behaved that gets the most attention, and it's such unfair. It's so unfair, you know, to the quiet child at the back that just gets on with their work and excels and that sort of thing. But how do you think homeschooling has benefited your son? Like, when you think about the journey that you've taken, the time that you've spent, the investment that you've made, what is it about that makes you think, you know what, I'm proud of myself, you know what, this has been good for him, it's been good for us? Like, what are those things that you can kind of reference?
So I think for us, the biggest For us, it's literally changed the dynamic of our home. Being able to be home and homeschool. My husband works really long hours. So if my kids were in normal school, they would see their dad on the weekends if he wasn't working, because he works Saturdays sometimes as well. Do you know what I mean? Sunday's busy for all of us, right? With church and everything. So not that we don't spend that time together, but it's not the same as being at home with the children. So that whole dynamic of just knowing your children, being around your children, to whatever extent we've been able to do. My kids don't have to go to bed on time, right? If they go to bed at 9, it doesn't matter. Wake up a little bit later tomorrow and we'll get on with it we'll take it from there kind of thing. It's not a big deal. But this way, no matter what time Ben gets home, the kids manage to spend time with their dad, which is great. I think emotionally more than anything, and I'd say that for all of us, it's benefited us, right? Boys have a difficult time in expressing their feelings, figuring them out for themselves even.
So true.
And they you know, like how they used to tell us when we were in school, girls when they're daydreaming, they just literally drift off, whereas boys, when they're not interested in the lesson, they start messing around, right? And so it's the same thing here at home. And I mean, it was a lesson to me once. There's stuff going on for him, and I mean, I was seeing things happening here in the home, and I'm like, what is going on? You're so angry or so upset, and not realizing. And I'm with him 24/7, please note, yeah. But I had not been with him. I'm just doing school and then getting on with, right, I got to do this thing, and you go do that. I'm cooking. I'm getting on my normal day. I hadn't been with him. And there was all this stuff that had been going on for him, ways that he'd been feeling, things that he'd been thinking, and he needed to talk. And even just to learn that about my child, do you know what I mean? That has been so beneficial. Knowing, I think a lot, do you know what I mean? Knowing which traits of mine he's taken, do you know what I mean? And then figuring out, oh my gosh, I've got to address that. And not to say that people whose kids are not at home with them don't get to do all of that. I'm just saying this is how it's played out for us, and I can't see it having played out in any other way. Just because of the way we are and how busy we could get when we were both working the kinds of hours that we were working, it just was not going to happen. I would have missed out, and I could have seen my son being more aggressive in school or getting more into trouble about stuff, and it's just he's asking questions and being misunderstood or not knowing how to work through his own emotions and just not either having that sounding board or just knowing how to verbalize it. I think that's actually the hardest bit. They're just like, I'm feeling like this, but I don't know what to say, and I'm going to do this. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense, but I'm still, you know?
Mahrukh, you said something, but I actually have a theory, and I'm the geek in me. I want to do a bit of research into it. Because I actually have a theory that I think that boys benefit from homeschooling the most, for the very point of what you said, in terms of like, there is definitely like a difference in the way that we've got 2 boys and 1 girl. Their emotional intelligence and the way in which they kind of develop, and again, the ability to understand their emotions and feelings and articulate them. And there is definitely a delay in comparison to their female counterparts. And so I think that oftentimes, like, they actually benefit the most from being homeschooled, because you can really kind of nurture that out of them, or into, like, I don't even know nurture that out of them is the right way to put it, but you can really kind of go to work on that and really kind of take your time in those key stages as they're trying to just figure themselves out. You know, my cousin, her son goes to a private school, and the private school that they have is, you know, like private schools, they can do their own thing, like they make up their own rules. I don't know if you guys, they do their own thing, like, you know, they run their hands, and they actually have it so that they I don't know how they word it. Like, if someone on the chat knows, please put it in. But he keeps the boys on for like a year longer. I can't remember if it's after primary school or after, I can't remember. I think it might be after primary school, but there's like, they have a longer stretch of time, and he says it's because boys just mature slower than girls, and so they kind of need a bit more time to kind of really just work out what's going on with themselves and that kind of thing. And it's interesting because the whole kind of concept of like them not really understanding their feelings as much and being able to articulate it as well. I don't know if boys actually ever really grow out of that. Like I feel like men.
Yeah, the book that helped me the most is Bringing Up Boys. Have you read that? Yeah, I think you have. I'm sure we talked about it at one point. Yeah. Mad book. I think you're right in what you're saying, And the reason for that is also this. Schools don't actually help boys, especially in primary school. Yes, it would probably be true all the way up to the top, but the reality is at some point they've got to take GCSEs. Everyone needs qualifications, But actually, why? Because they don't learn the same way. You're asking a boy, right, to learn in a confined space with a very strict structure, which is totally actually against most of their nature, because they don't learn through that. It's not as effective. And I think anybody who's been around them long enough, I had a lot of boy heavy classes when I was in school. I tell you, I just had to be ready for anything. There's no way that you can't even push them the same way, because they'll just switch off.
100%. And understanding the differences between boys and girls is so important. And I think it's one of the key issues as to why so many boys don't do well in school. Because most teachers are female. And they're females that don't understand the way that boys work. So this whole thing of sit down, stay in your chair, just sit still for a long time. Like, they're not trying to do that. Like, come and see my sons. They'll be like on the chair, like one leg is up here, and they can't just sit still for a long period of time. Girls can draw, but no, boys active like they want.
They develop their fine motor skills much later as well. So where you can say, oh yeah, we're all going to start school, we're going to start reception age 4-5, right? And we're all going to be writing our letters the same week that we're learning what they are. How can you expect that from a boy? Do you know what I mean? Give him a moment, right? Then, I would say for us, and of course I only have the one, but he was probably 7 by when we actually started to work on handwriting, and I wouldn't say that he was proud enough to show it to anybody till he was almost 9. And that's just one boy, I know, but I know that he's not alone in that. Absolutely, yeah. They need, but it doesn't mean that they're not developing, right? They can reel off facts like nobody's business, right? And it doesn't mean that they're not going to learn how to read. It doesn't mean that they're not going to learn how to spell. It's just that we have to realize how different each skill of language is, and it's going to take its time to develop. And it does happen at its own time, but they get it. They do get it, and they get into trouble about it when they're in school, because the teachers are also like, right, I need to move you on, right, or you're not, so why else we're going to begin to start calling them dumb, aren't we? Because in comparison they are. But why is education in comparison? There is no need for that, really, right? I'm always going to be good at one thing, and the person next to me is always going to be better at something else. There's always going to be somebody better than me at something. So why is it about being the best at something? It's not. It's about being able to learn, being able to put it together, being able to understand. It's not about how much I understand and how much I can do and how quickly, right?
Within a certain space of time, or
right.
Absolutely. And I just love being able to work at the pace of my children. Like, for example, my middle son, it's taken us a long time to get the times tables, to understand time, but we have all the time that he needs. Because I'm working at his pace, and so it's so good. But keep on going until you get this. And that's something that's so important to me, because even as an adult at 33, I don't know all of my timetables off by heart. I don't.
You're not alone.
There were gaps, and the reality is, okay, that we've got to get past this. We've got to tick certain boxes, whether or not you've learned it, whether or not you get it. We've got to move on. The curriculum is not waiting for you. The pace of the lesson is not waiting for you. Every teacher has their targets that they have to meet, and so that's how gaps can actually occur. And I'm a living example of that. I got a B at GCSE A level. I got a B at GCSE A level. GCSE A level. What kind of thing? I got a B at GCSE Maths. Maybe because my mum paid for a maths tutor when I was about to start my GCSEs, and he kind of really trained me on how to kind of pass the exam. And this is going back to two of the points that you made. So I learned for the purpose of passing the exam, not for the purpose of learning. And the beauty and the art of learning, and the quality of learning in of itself. And that was something that, I look back on that, and it's quite a frustration, because I'm like, I don't know some of the times like that is, and so, but there were gaps. And it was just like, just as long as you pass the test, it's all good. Whereas now, I'm able to take as much time as is required, so that you are able to really get it, and you're learning at your pace, because we're not in competition with anybody else, we're learning at your pace, and that is so important. And going back to what we were talking about with the difference between boys and girls, statistically, boys don't do well in boys' schools. And so I don't know, for any of you out there that are parents, boys actually do better in mixed schools. And girls do very well in girls' schools, because girls academically, they do better, right? Because of the way in which our academia is presented, in terms of you sit at the table and you complete tests and exams and all of that kind of stuff. And the nature of studying is very akin to the way that girls are and the way that girls learn. So girls do very well academically. And so because of that, boys do well when they're in a mixed school, because the girls kind of set the standard. They set the bar, and then the boys have to kind of work to that standard, Right. Boys, they do not do well in boys' schools in comparisons. That's just something to kind of, make parents aware. I just want to put that out there in terms of, if you're a parent and you are thinking about what type of school to put your child in, if you do want to go down the school route, and if your son is a boy, especially for secondary school, single-sex schools do not work they don't work in their favour. For all the reasons that we've talked about, boys are just, they're different. They're,
unique.
They are unique, and so so by the way, does anyone have any questions? Please put it in the question box. We have 10 minutes. Okay, right. That went quickly. Let me just scroll. Okay. At school, didn't you as a teacher ever have a gap analysis for children at school? At school, didn't you as a teacher have a gap analysis for children at school? I'm trying to understand what the question is. So I taught at secondary school, and no, we didn't have a gap analysis, because when you are teaching at secondary school level, you are teaching for your subject. And when you are teaching for your subject, your focus is to meet the targets for that particular subject. Let me go back to an example. There was a student that came to me, so I picked them up from year 10 all the way through to year 13. She came to me, and I was meant to see her through coursework, but she couldn't write. She couldn't write. She couldn't string together a sentence that was cohesive. And I suspect that what happened is that perhaps she was given, computers to type away at, or whatever, tablets, because she was brilliant from there. But to give her a pen and paper, for her to actually, pen things down. That didn't happen. And so I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how did this young lady work her way through the entire education system and she's not been able to, you know what I mean? This hasn't been achieved. Now, in terms of, in terms of the way in which we went about seeing her through her GCSEs is that we had to literally work with what was available to us. We had to literally just kind of work with her, work with what we had. And okay, you can't write, you can type, you know, that's fantastic. But essentially, our goal, more than anything, is to get you to at least pass, you know, get this coursework to be completed. So when it comes to gaps, no, you know, unfortunately, the focus and the priority is to just tick those boxes in terms of, I as a teacher had my targets to meet. I had she had to complete the coursework. How we were going to do that, I just had to kind of figure that out, at least so that she can scrape through. But in terms of gaps, like from previous learning, they were missed. And that was that.
So that would have been where learning support, English as an additional language, SCN, all those guys would have come in, because I did a lot of work across the school where that's what we were doing. We had kids in year 7, year 8 who couldn't read. They'd managed to make it through primary, got there, they couldn't read. Or they'd come from war-torn countries and now they have to get their GCSEs and we have to help them through that. So that only happened through assessment that happened outside of the classroom and support that was given outside of the classroom to help them cope with classwork and coursework that they had to do, because the class teachers don't have the time. You have enough to do with the number of children in your classroom and the demands that you have to get them through that. They're not going to give you previous data. It has to be support, and it depends on the kind of support you have in the school. It also depends on the background of the child. There's a lot of white British kids who are managing to get that far in school without any without literacy, you know, let alone the ethnic minorities and those who are seeking asylum, etc., etc. So, yeah, no.
And I think also in terms of English as an additional language and all of that sort of support, I don't know about your school, and I think it might be different with secondary school, but I found that we were quite strained in resources with that,
right.
To be honest. And so there were many subject classes whereby we definitely did need more support, but we didn't have it because the budget wasn't there for it, you know. And so there were a few support work, there were a few support teachers that they had to spread around, you know, the different classes, because remember, it's not like primary school where you have one class, they stick together
and a million people to
the whole subject. You know, you've got so many different subjects, so many different classes, so it's very, very different. So I mean, a lot of my experiences working in the school very, very much did make me kind of question the education system and inspired me, like yourself, to want to actually educate my children myself, you know. Yeah. And so in terms of your decision, so by the way, did you hear my phone ringing when it just rang?
No.
Okay, good. I was trying to sorry. So we've actually run out of time. So I just wanted to say, in terms of your, now that you're at the point whereby you're coming to the end of your journey and you're able to reflect back on everything, is there anything you would have done differently? Do you still feel that you made the right decision? And where were you going? What's next, type of thing?
Oh, right. Definitely wouldn't change a thing. I guess the advice I would give myself more than anything is don't moan as much. Enjoy it more, savor it more. But I think that's just general. Everyone says that with kids, right? I can easily talk for hours actually about times when I've just been more on the moany side than the enjoyment side. So definitely enjoy it more. Where next? I don't know. Remains to be seen. I've kind of been playing it by ear all this time. To do this again with Jessie, though, would actually be pretty incredible, me thinking about it now, because we kind of fell into it with Asa, right? And then kind of worked our way through. This time, I would be so much more prepared, so much more relaxed, so much, really, I would be able to take my own advice and probably enjoy it more. Do you know what I mean? So let's see, actually. This is getting me excited. We shall see.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for honouring the invitation, and you know, I appreciate that you kept it 100. Like, you really did keep it real in terms of the realities of parenting, of homeschooling, and I'm just loving having these conversations with different homeschooling moms like yourself, so that people can kind of see. They can understand how we arrive at these decisions, and how it works for different families, different family dynamics, different children, you know, and that kind of thing, different visions and so on. And I think you've really, really helped to kind of bring an angle that, you know, has been insightful and entertaining.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. I didn't think I'd have so much fun. Seriously, I was so nervous before. I don't even know why, but you know what I mean? I'm like, this has been a blast. I should have made a cup of coffee.
It's been amazing to get.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And guys, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. I do hope that you all have a lovely evening. You've had a lot of hearts, by the way, Mahrukh, a lot of hearts.
Oh.